one knows what's transpiring. It takes tremendous courage to put forth the effort to investigate and speak out about it. The Davids did it. Not only did they investigate organ harvesting, but they published a book, traveled around the world to raise the awareness about it for 12 years. They have traveled to more than 30 countries, presenting their work to governments, organizations, and individuals. They were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2010 for their investigation of organ harvesting crimes in China. Their tireless efforts continue to bring international attention to the fight of Falun Gong practitioners and other persecuted groups in China. Mr. Matus, Mr. Kilgore, practitioners, and all who wish to see a world more just, thank you for your work. Oh, thank you. Dear friends of Falun Gong, shows on me, there are at least 5,000 of us here this morning. I think it looks like more like 10,000, but they tell me from truth, I have to say 5,000, but there are at least 5,000 of us here today. From all over, from more than 110 countries, I believe, and I thank all of you for going to the great difficulty for coming here this morning. Imagine a government committing a genocide against a mediation community which practices truth, compassion, and forbearance. Freedom of religion is the first freedom in any democratic society. When it goes, other liberties soon go too. David Matus and I accept this award with enormous honor, and we do so on behalf of millions of Falun Gong practitioners around the world, and we grieve the innocent victims of the genocide that's going on in China, who were killed for their beliefs by the government of China. The inhuman government-directed commerce has now been going on, as you know, for 18 to 19 years. Our mid-2016 update with Ethan Gutman concludes that a minimum of 60,000 Chinese citizens, mostly Falun Gong prisoners of conscience, were being killed for their vital organs yearly. That translates to about 150 innocent human beings a day. Uyghurs, Tibetans, and Christians are also victimized in much smaller numbers as of mid-2016. The American baseball icon, Babe Ruth, said, and I quote, "It is hard to beat a person who never gives up," close quote. None of us here today, and many others not here, must never give up either until the Beijing persecution stops. Let's all resolve again to continue our peaceful protest until it stops. Thanks to Pastor Lee, friends of Falun Gong, Alan Adler included, of course, Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, DAFO, the International Coalition to End Organ Abuse, and all other groups and individuals who are in this task together. Finally, a number of democracies have already banned organ tourism, as you know, to China by their nationals, including Spain, Israel, Norway, Chile, and Taiwan. Italy now has a law too. If your own country is not among this group, please urge your transplant surgeons and legislators to do so this year. Thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you very much for this award. It's an award I would rather not have received, because I would rather not have been in this situation where the Falun Gong have been killed in the hundreds of thousands for their organs. I would rather not that the research that I and David Kilgore did has turned out to be true. One of the reasons that David Kilgore and I came to the conclusion that we did, that the Falun Gong were being killed in mass numbers for their organs, was that the precautions that should have been in place to prevent the abuse were not in place. The Chinese system had vilified without inhibition the practice of Falun Gong. One can see some signs of that even around here today. The Chinese system had institutionalized the sourcing of organs for transplants from prisoners, originally prisoners sentenced to death. The Chinese system withdrew state funding from the health system because of the shift from socialism to capitalism. And the health system needed large infusions of money to keep its doors open. So they got into the business of selling organs from prisoners of conscience in large numbers to transplanters and their own population. Since we began this work and did our research, David Kilgore and I have been wandering around the world to try to put in place those precautions that should have been in place to prevent the abuse from happening. What we saw was a huge amount of money being made from this transplant system and nothing in place to prevent it. So we joined with many of you in attempting to put those precautions in place. And indeed, I can see already from the people I've met since I've come here that you are our colleagues in this joint effort to put these precautions in place. David Kilgore and I are a couple lawyers from Canada who on our own, even though we can intellectually observe gaps in the legal structure internationally, can't do that much about it on our own. We need your help, your efforts, and you have given, you have been our cohorts in trying to affect this change. You are giving me this award, but I thank you for joining with us in this effort to put these precautions in place. And I look forward in the future to continuing this joint effort. Thank you very much.
Over the years, we gathered on this lawn every summer to rally for the end of the persecution of Falun Gong. Yet, we are often met with questions about why the Chinese Communist Party should want to persecute a peaceful group of meditators. Thus, we have had to turn our attention to explaining the agenda of communism, not only in China, but around the world. Since its inception, communism has been bent on destroying humanity and morality, undermining religion, and setting human beings against each other in endless struggle. In its 100-year history, communism has killed 100 million people. No matter what forms communism may take, it has one goal: the destruction of humanity. We have seen this in the gulags of the Soviet Union, the killing fields of Cambodia, the dictatorships of Africa and elsewhere. The biggest crimes of communism are its continuous effort in destroying traditional culture and destroying morality. In the West, the specter of communism did not disappear with the disintegration of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. Communism teaches people to oppose belief in God and to cast out the divine. Human civilization was transmitted to man by gods. Chinese civilization has seen the prosperity of the Han and Tang dynasties, and Western civilization reached its peak during the Renaissance. If we can preserve the true, good values and ways of life meant for us, we maintain our connection with that which is everlasting. However, If we destroy our cultures and traditions, our thinking will corrupt, and along with it, our choices and behaviors. The consequences of what we choose to believe are real. The traditional beliefs of the world's great civilizations have given humanity meaning, purpose, and a moral compass to live their lives. Morality civilizes our animal nature and helps us to be open to what is divine in us. The atheism taught by communism uproots morality. When communism destroys tradition and morality, it cuts us off from the divine in heaven and ourselves. We need to find our way back to our cultural roots. There is no neutral in a fight of life and death. If we let communism win, our society will perish, and along with it, our sense of self as individuals. Today, our first speaker will be Congressman Keith Rothfuss of the 3rd District of Pennsylvania. Congressman.
Wow. Welcome. Welcome, men and women of conscience. Welcome, men and women and practitioners of Falun Gong. I can't believe how big this crowd is. Raise your hand if you're here for the first time. Look at that. Truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. These are the tenets of Falun Gong. Since 1999, the Communist Party of China has wrongly persecuted the practitioners of this spiritual practice. Under the guise of so-called social stability, the Chinese government has subjected the practitioners of Falun Gong to abuse. Not only are the followers of this practice unfairly imprisoned by their government, they are subjected to a variety of human rights abuses, including physical and psychological torture, forced labor, and illegal organ harvesting. These violations of human rights, of human decency, have gone on too long. The Communist Party of China continues to this day to persecute and target the peaceful practitioners of Falun Gong. They use false propaganda to victimize these peaceful people. They use fear to force the practitioners into hiding or out of China altogether. They systemically and unabashedly target innocent people because of their beliefs. Targeting those who practice Falun Gong does not lead to social stability. It does not lead to peace. It leads to the dehumanization and destruction of a people seeking to live out their lives peacefully. In 2010, Congress condemned the actions of the Chinese government against the practitioners of Falun Gong. This was a step in the right direction, but we must do more. The rights of minorities of conscience must be protected. We must protect those fleeing from the persecution of the Chinese government, and we must continue to march faithfully forward towards ending the atrocities committed by the Communist Party of China against the practitioners of Falun Gong. No one, anywhere, should be punished, imprisoned, persecuted, or killed for their religious beliefs. Don't let them crush your spirit. Truth and love, in the end, will win. Thank you. God bless you.
Our next speaker will be Gail Manchin, Vice Chairman of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom.
Thank you, and good morning. My name is Gail Manchin, and I am Vice Chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, more commonly referred to as USER. It is a great privilege and an honor to join you all here today. And I thank the Falun Dafa Association of Washington, D.C. for once again inviting you, sir, to participate here. As you may know, our mission is to elevate and promote religious freedom around the globe. We do this by monitoring and reporting on religious freedom conditions around the world and by making policy recommendations to the White House, the State Department, and the U.S. Congress. In 2018, USERV celebrates 20 years since the International Religious Freedom Act became a law, which created our commission, a companion office at the State Department, and elevated religious freedom in U.S. foreign policy. As we at USERV reflect on the last 2 decades, we are soberly reminded that for many individuals, religious communities around the world, that religious freedom is no better off today than it was 20 years ago. Regrettably, this is the situation for many religious and faith communities in China, including Falun Gong practitioners. In fact, that is why USERV has continued to report on China ever since this commission began. When USERV issued its very first annual report in May 2000, China was among only 3 countries that appeared in that report. That means USERV has been reporting on China since our creation and every year since then. In that very first report, USERV noted that following the 1999 crackdown on Falun Gong, Chinese authorities sentenced leaders to long prison terms and detained thousands of practitioners, even brutally beating some to death. And I see the pictures of loved ones in the front of the group here. Thank you for being here, that we remember those that are not with us. Thank you. 19 years later, it is China's sustained and gross mistreatment of Falun Gong that in part underpins its record as one of the worst violators of religious freedom and related human rights in the world. It is also why USERV has consistently recommended that China be designated as a country of particular concern, or CPC, for its systematic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedom. In each instance, the State Department has made such designation. It has rightly named China as a CPC. How is it that nearly 2 decades, the situation facing Falun Gong practitioners has not improved? Since President Xi Jinping came to power, the Chinese government has made it abundantly clear that it will not tolerate thoughts and beliefs independent of the state. Throughout the country and across the religious communities, Chinese authorities are attempting forcibly to indoctrinate their own people to believe only what the state wants them to believe. It's as if Beijing has issued a warning: believe what we tell you to believe or else. Religious believers everywhere know that those kinds of threats, fearsome and real as they may be, ring hollow in the hearts, souls, and conscience of people of faith and those of no faith at all. That's because no individual, group, or government, not even the Chinese government, has the right to compel others to act against their conscience or restrain them from answering a call. That's why you are here today. So when Chinese authorities harass Falun Gong practitioners, when they detain, torture, sexually assault, experiment on, and forcibly harvest organs, their brutal actions not only defy countless international human rights standards and the broader rules-based international order, but they chip away at the very foundation of humanity. Because let us remember that freedom of religion or belief is not a government-granted right. It is a universal right available to all. And it is up to us to never let China forget, to let them know that we are watching, and to stand in solidarity with Falun Gong, not just in China, but all over the world. We must encourage the U.S. government, including our friends in the hallowed halls of Congress, to defend the rights of Falun Gong and hold accountable Chinese officials and agencies responsible for the severe violations of religious freedom. We must take advantage of the mechanisms at the United Nations, such as China's upcoming Universal Periodic Review, to shine a light on that government's abuses. And the Chinese government must immediately and unequivocally cease labeling Falun Gong as a cult. Lift the ban on its practice. Stop harassing and detaining prisoners and practitioners, and unconditionally release all Falun Gong prisoners of conscience and those otherwise detained against their will. Your presence today and your compassion in the fight to defend the rights of Falun Gong help to realize each of these objectives. On behalf of you, sir, we salute you, we support you, and we stand with you. Thank you. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Congressman Donald Payne of the New Jersey 4th District. Please welcome Mr. Payne back again.
Good morning, and thank you for once again giving me the honor to speak today about the ongoing attempt by the Chinese government to eliminate Falun Gong. Despite the Chinese Communist Party's 19th year attempt to eliminate Falun Gong, millions of people in China continue to practice their religion. Falun Gong is a peaceful practice belonging to the Buddhist school and embraced by millions of people who seek positivity and elevated moral character through exercise and meditation. For decades, Chinese authorities have entered public and private spaces, schools, households, villages, and businesses in order to transform Falun Gong practitioners through forced religious conversion. Thousands of Falun Gong practitioners continue to be held in prisons, detention centers, and forced labor camps under deplorable conditions, and many simply for their beliefs. Those held captive are tortured and beaten multiple times a day. Some are sexually abused. Not only that, Chinese authorities have admitted that in the past, organs were sourced from executed prisoners and from Falun Gong followers who had been held captive. This kind of persecution and torment against a peaceful people must stop, and stop now. I'm outraged at these human rights violations, which go against the basic human rights to religious conviction and bodily integrity. I will continue to fight for the human rights that every citizen of China and of the world and humanity should be able to experience without fear. We here have a president now that supports the president of China because he would like to be a dictator and president for life as well. But that is not what the United States Constitution says. The United States Constitution says that every 8 years there will be a peaceful transfer of power. So there are many of us that are concerned about what is transpiring now in the White House. So we have our issues here as well in the United States. But I promise to you, as my father before me, that I will be here every year until the practitioner of Falun Gong is persecuted no more. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Robert Herman, Vice President of Freedom House.
Good morning. I'm honored to be here today with all of you at this momentous gathering representing Freedom House, a non-governmental organization that for more than 75 years has been in the forefront of the worldwide struggle for democracy, human rights, rule of law, and human dignity. We stand proudly in solidarity with the courageous practitioners of Falun Gong in China. We are inspired by their refusal to submit to the Chinese regime's brutal repression and relentless efforts to crush a vibrant and peaceful social and cultural force seen as posing a significant threat to the authoritarian state's monopoly on political power and citizen loyalty. Through its publications and advocacy at home and abroad, Freedom House is committed to exposing the Chinese regime's systematic assault on freedom of expression, association, peaceful assembly, and religious belief, all of which is being carried out with impunity. We are pushing and working with all those in the international community, governments, and civil society that seek to hold the Chinese government to account for denying its citizens their fundamental rights. Religious liberty is in the American DNA. It is part of our heritage and our identity. Religious liberty is the pillar of our democratic system, and it is a universal right that all governments are obligated to uphold. It is imperative that our own government speak out and take concrete measures to support freedom of religion and belief globally, including in China. Doing so honors the values, principles, and ideals that have long defined U.S. foreign policy on a bipartisan basis and conveys to democracy and human rights advocates worldwide that we have their back. Practitioners of Falun Gong in China have been doggedly persecuted by the Chinese Communist parties for nearly 2 decades. President Xi Jinping, who has now done away with term limits so he can rule for life, forcibly portrays China as a modern country. But the truth is radically different. The regime, which includes a massive security apparatus, engages in wholesale repression and horrific treatment of those viewed as challenging any aspect of despotic rule. Along with other religious minorities, as well as government opponents, Falun Gong followers have been illegally arrested, detained, imprisoned, tortured, forced into psychiatric hospitals and re-education centers, sent to labor camps without fair trials, and have died in prison from inhumane conditions. And as if that were not appalling enough, there is ample reliable evidence to conclude that of the 60,000 to 100,000 transplants carried out each year in Chinese hospitals, a large majority of those organs come from the bodies of prisoners of conscience like the Falun Gong. Let's be clear. These actions violate international norms and standards and simple human decency. The Chinese leadership must be held accountable. Democratic governments and multilateral institutions with a mandate to advance democracy and human rights are complicit when they fail to speak out. Their silence and inaction, in effect, condones China's behavior and will be viewed in Beijing as a lack of political will to confront a rising global power. That is morally unacceptable. When hundreds of thousands of Falun Gong have been incarcerated since 1999, and thousands are being held prisoners of conscience at any given time. In addition, the government's propaganda machine aggressively vilifies Falun Gong practitioners, portraying them as disruptors, as enemies of the people, and purveyors of alien values, as if to justify their severe persecution. For all of the Chinese regime's power, the leadership is afraid of its own citizenry, especially of groups and movements that achieve popular legitimacy like Falun Gong. But the Falun Gong story in China is not just one of victims and survivors of brutal repression. It is also a story of unshakable faith, perseverance, and resilience. That's what we are here today to celebrate. We may also be seeing the impact of practitioners' courage, and new opportunities are emerging to push back against the government's targeting Falun Gong. The struggle of women and men who follow the Falun Gong path, and those who support their right to do so, is a long way from over. U.S. diplomats and members of Congress, as well as those of us in civil society who have public platforms, must elevate this issue going forward. Human rights and democratic freedoms, including the treatment of Falun Gong and other persecuted groups, must be at the center of discussions with Chinese officials. These are core American values, they are core global values, and they shape how we in the United States think about our interests worldwide. U.S. officials must make clear to the Chinese government that the U.S. stands with those who seek to do nothing more than to exercise their fundamental rights, and we should endeavor to explain why and how greater pluralism, freedom, and government accountability will lead to a stronger and more prosperous China. The U.S. should also use the global Magnitsky mechanism to enhance individual accountability for violations of human rights. The mechanism grew out of congressional legislation named for a young Russian lawyer who uncovered massive state corruption at high levels and died in prison from horrendous treatment. Independent organizations like Freedom House must continue to document, analyze, and report on widespread violations of human rights so that those in power will one day be brought to justice. Let me end where I started, in expressing a deep admiration for the undaunted courage and the staying power of China's Falun Gong adherents. Their struggle is the same one waged by activists all around the world. They are determined to live in societies where they are free to think, to say, and to believe what they want, and where competitively elected governments must answer to their citizens. There should be no doubt that the Falun Gong practitioners will change, and indeed are changing China rather than the other way around. I know that you join me in keeping faith that human freedom will prevail. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Nina Shea, Director of Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute.
Thank you all. What an incredible showing. There are thousands of you here today, and I applaud you. I am honored to be here in solidarity with you today. I applaud you because it takes courage, it takes perseverance to speak out in memory of those who have no voice, who have been crushed among the Falun Gong movement inside China. This has been going on for 20 years. Falun Gong are the victims of an increasingly totalitarian, advanced modern state where technology is used to crush anything outside the government, including this spiritual practices. The Falun Gong are among the most persecuted religious believers in the world today. Thousands have been put in prison, in the Chinese prisons, with little or no due process. They have been tortured with electricity to their genitals. They have been put in psychiatric institutes, and now they are being harvested without their consent for vital organs, allowed to suffer, sicken, and die because of their spiritual beliefs. This is an outrage. It's one of the worst violations of human rights in China and in the world. And I think that it's time that the United States apply a Helsinki Accord-style accord, insist on it with China, in addition to trade discussions and security and defense discussions. We have another vital interest of our own, and that is religious freedom. Religious freedom is part of the National Security Strategy report of the Trump administration. It makes the protection of religious minorities to be a national security strategy. It is easy to see why. What is happening shows the utter savagery and brutalness of the Chinese government. This must stop. We must continue to keep this issue in front of Congress, in front of the American government, in front of the world. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Nina. Our next speaker, a true friend of Falun Gong. She has been relentless in her support of freedom of belief for practitioners. This will be her last rally. She's going to be sorely missed. Please welcome Congresswoman Liliana Rosa.
Well, good morning. Thank you so very much. I am so thrilled, so honored, so pleased to be with you today. It's such an honor to be with so many friends of Falun Gong. And I really like all of those posters, especially the ones that talk about the evil nature of communism. Because I was born in a free country, in Cuba, and now that country is ruled by thugs, communist regime, that they crush people's human rights and stomp on freedom of the press and any kind of freedom. So I know that when you say the evil specter of communism is ruling our world, and that communism's ultimate goal is to destroy the human race, I know that personally to be true. And as we stand here today, marking the 19th anniversary of your persecution, Congress again, look at that beautiful building, Congress again commits to your right to freely practice your belief. 2 years ago, with your tremendous support, I was so proud to have sponsored and led House Resolution 343, which was Congress's first formal recognition of the plight of Falun Gong practitioners. And together we sent a loud message, a clear message from the United States Congress to the evil regime in China, that we demand an immediate end to the persecution of the Falun Gong, that we demand that all Falun Gong practitioners and prisoners of conscience be immediately released, and that we call on China to immediately end the inhuman and unethical practice of organ harvesting. Together we did that. And I'm very grateful that my wonderful friend, my dear friend, Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey, continues to push for a similar resolution in the United States Senate so that both the Senate and the House can be on record officially condemning China's horrific behavior. Followers of Falun Gong are peaceful, compassionate, and tolerant individuals who should be respected for their beliefs, not persecuted. And they have a basic, fundamental human right to practice your spiritual beliefs without fear, without harassment, without persecution. Yet we see in report after report, including our State Department's very own latest report on human rights in China, that Falun Gong practitioners are subjected to some of Beijing's worst human rights violations. Widespread surveillance, arbitrary detention, torture, the ghoulish practice of organ harvesting. We cannot allow Beijing's mistreatment of the Falun Gong to continue. So we come together today to raise awareness about the plight of followers of Falun Gong. And we recommit ourselves to stop China's horrible abuses. And we continue the fight so that you will finally be able to practice your beliefs without fear of persecution. Help stop persecution of Falun Gong in China. That says it all. And I have been so proud to have been working with you year after year throughout my time here in Congress. And I look forward to continuing our fight in the years ahead. Thank you so much for the support, and it's my pleasure and my honor to have supported you as well. Muchísimas gracias. Muy agradecida. Oh, okay. Wow, let me see. Uh-oh, we got a surprise here. What do we have?
Hi, Lana. I'm from Miami.
Miami, wait a minute, yay.
I wanted to thank you for supporting us for 19 years, for standing for truth, compassion, and tolerance. I remember going to your office many years ago, and you received us personally with open arms, open heart, and open mind. And thank you for taking action and standing for the right side of history and what is right. Muchas gracias.
Muy agradecida. That was beautiful. Boy, I was young when I started here. Very long time ago. Look at this. Oh my goodness. It says it is up to you, it is up to me. It is our homework on behalf of those who cannot speak. That's a wise woman who said that. Thank you very much. And look, it's all the resolutions that I have sponsored. Wow. Muchas gracias. Thank you so very much. Yeah, really.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next speaker is Christina Olner, Director of Government Relations with the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation.
Good morning. It is an honor to be here with you all today. The gathering like the one we are having here right now on the lawn of the United States Capitol would not be possible today in China. In the world's most populous nation, with the second largest economy and military, people must make the horrific decision of abandoning their most deeply held religious beliefs or facing death, persecution, and torture. The Chinese Communist Party is threatened by any religion or philosophy that does not acknowledge the party as the supreme and ultimate authority. And there is no limit to the crimes that the CCP is willing to commit to eradicate any threat. There was a time when Beijing welcomed the contributions of the Falun Gong spiritual movement to Chinese society. But that changed in 1999, when more than 10,000 of you gathered peacefully in front of the Communist Party headquarters in Beijing. A peaceful movement then became a threat to the CCP. And since then, the CCP has gone to unimaginable measures to eradicate it. Over 3,700 practitioners have been tortured to death. Tens of thousands are today held in labor camps, prisons, and mental hospitals, where they are forced to endure torture and brainwashing. As if murdering these innocent people was not enough, China tortures them beyond death as well. The Chinese government openly admits to harvesting the organs of executed dissidents and has murdered thousands of Falun Gong practitioners to this end. China's illegal organ harvesting industry has a value of approximately $9 billion. This is not simply blood money, but blood money extracted from the desecrated corpses of innocent people who simply wanted to practice their religion or philosophy. But we in the West hear very little about these abuses by Beijing, despite the staggering scale of this persecution. And that is because China is making every effort possible to export its totalitarianism and to silence the truth about the crimes it is committing against its own people today. As President Kennedy said about the Soviet Union, free countries have never had to put up a wall to keep in their own people. China is not only putting up a wall of lies and abuse to control its people, but it is waging a war against its own people. The CCP's power is so fragile that they must employ armies of digital troops, legions of thugs to enforce party dictates, and roll tanks into city centers to silence students. The United States must stand against the lies and abuses of the Chinese Communist Party. We must not allow the CCP to spread its vile tyranny abroad and to silence us in our own country. And it is witnesses like yourselves, gatherings like the one we're having here today, that will ensure that the truth is heard. So I thank you all for your courage and for your witness, and the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation stands with you in your fight for truth and for freedom.
Thank you, Christina. Our next speaker will be Congressman Dana Rohrabacher of the 15th District of California. He has been one of our longest and strongest supporters in the Congress. Please welcome the Congressman.
Well, let me make a correction right off the bat. I haven't been your longest supporter. I support your ideals. I support everything that you stand for. If you were some people who were just there and had different ideas, didn't promote truthfulness and honesty and kindness and caring for each other, if that's not what you stood for, I wouldn't be with you. And today I tell you, I am proud to stand with you, and I always have been. You're not just for overthrowing a totalitarian regime, you are for building a better society in China, and yes, a better world for all of our children. That's what it's all about. I've got 14-year-old kids at home. God blessed me. I spent my entire life fighting communism, and so I didn't get married till I was 50. And God then blessed me with triplets 14 years ago, so I have 3 kids at home. And God, let me just say this, and God will bless the Falun Gong just like they have blessed me. We will have peace, we will have happiness, we will have love in our lives, because that's what we are promoting for the world. I stand with you. We stand together on those values. And let me just say, I have a resolution. It's H-Res 932 that codifies and will put the United States government officially on the side of Falun Gong practitioners, and it talks not just about some strategic thing in China, because that's important to keep the peace of the world, but to your core values that you are trying to espouse for mankind. So H-Res 932 officially would identify the United States Congress with those values which you are advocating, and those values which those people, we have the pictures of people who have sacrificed their lives. Many people in the history of this world have sacrificed their lives to make the world a better place. None of them are more noble than those people who've been arrested in the Falun Gong and stood there espousing these wonderful things for all humanity. They are the greatest heroes of humankind. I join you in today recognizing them and being the author of the resolution that will put America and the United States Congress squarely on the side of the values you espouse and the values these people died for. So God bless all of you, and God bless those people who gave their lives. And finally, it does my heart so much good to see you here. I want all of the American people to see you here. But more importantly, I want the dictators and the gangsters who run that government in China to see you here and understand their days are numbered. The people of China will be free. You are giving them hope. And I am especially happy when I understand about the new Taidong movement, in which instead of going at those leaders, those members of the Communist Party in China with a fist, instead of doing that, being consistent with what Falun Gong is all about, you are going to them with an open hand, saying, join us, make the world better, get away from these gangsters and come in, you can be part of us, of betterment of humanity. That movement, asking those people in the Communist Party in China, the Taidong movement, is one of the greatest forces for peace in the world today. It will be the success of the Taidong that makes my children safe here, because we will not be at war, at odds with one another. It is a false dichotomy if anyone says we have to worry about and war with China. We are not. The people of China are our greatest friends, and they're the greatest friends because they will help us build a safer and more peaceful world. You are at the forefront of that movement in human history. God bless you for that. You have many people who are on your side who have not spoken up. And just let me tell you, they are there. When the American people understand, and that's what we're doing today, what you stand for, the values, the honesty, the courtesy, the caring of humankind that your movement represents, the American people will be and are on your side. So God bless you. I am with you. America is with you. And today we send the message to the gangsters in China, your days are numbered. The Falun Gong and the better part of humanity and the Chinese people will succeed and overcome this evil that now controls our society. Thank you all very much. God bless.
Please welcome back Congressman Ted Poe of the 7th District in Texas.
Howdy. I'm glad to be here today. I'm not only a member of the United States Congress, but I represent part of the state of Texas. And I welcome you to the center of freedom in the world, Washington, D.C. Thank you for being here in this cradle of liberty. It is our goal, our determination, and our hope that we will be able to spread that word of freedom to China. China, the government, the thugs that run the country, don't believe in freedom. Don't believe in freedom for the Falun Gong. That's unfortunate, because as my friend Mr. Robacher said, their days are numbered because they do not believe in freedom for all of the people. There are two basic human rights, and one of those is religious freedom. Our country was founded on the belief of religious freedom. The First Amendment of the Constitution, the first right in the First Amendment, talks about religious freedom. Religious freedom doesn't exist in China. You know it better than anyone. And it's ironic because you preach peace. You don't preach war. You preach peace. And your religion is a religion of peace. But yet, the communist government denies your ability to practice your religious freedom. We're not going to allow that to continue. And the idea that government takes people, puts them in prison, and sells their body parts for money is reprehensible. That is the worst evil in the world. For a nation to take its citizens, kill them, and take their body parts and sell them for money. That's the worst human rights violation in the world. And you and your families are experiencing that, but those days shall end. We will make sure that those days end. Because you cannot be silent. You cannot be silent by any government or any foe. Because right is on your side, the Almighty is on your side, and America is on your side as well. So don't be silent. Be vocal. Be loud. Be courageous. Be bold. And we will stand with you in that. In my other life, I used to be a judge in Texas. And if the Chinese government was in my court and we were trying the government on human rights violations, the Chinese Communist government would be found guilty of violating the human rights of you and other people in China. I think that we could, well, let me say it this way. I think we should have that trial. Let's put the Chinese government on trial. And if we put them on trial before you, I think they would be found guilty of the human rights violations. The United States talks about human rights violators. Unfortunately, we don't talk about the Chinese government's human rights violations near enough. So we are going to raise the awareness of the Chinese government human rights violations against the Chinese people. Not just about Americans who are in China, but the Chinese citizens who have to live in China, the Falun Gong. We're going to raise that awareness. The world will know, the world will continue to know your fight, and the world will stand with you in your goal to stop the number one human rights violation in the world, religious freedom. So don't be discouraged. Don't be faint of heart. Freedom, what we all want, is actually what we're all fighting for throughout history, even here in the United States and in China too. And so your freedom to worship the way you want to is important. And do not give up. Do not grow weary. Do not worry about the government keeping you awake at night. That's backwards. Government should worry, the Chinese government should worry about you keeping them awake all night. And I encourage you to keep them awake by being vocal, being bold, and understanding that freedom comes with a price, but the price is worth fighting for. God bless you. And that's just the way it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next speaker will be Atticus Sweat on behalf of the Dr. Lantos Sweat Lantos Foundation.
party leadership established an office whose sole mission was to get rid of you. Your friends and family members have been arrested, starved, tortured, and abused by the Communist Chinese. The Communists have even killed many of your family members and your friends.
Chinese authorities have entered the public and private spaces, schools, households, villages, and businesses in order to transform Falun Gong practitioners through forced religious conversion.
Killed him. This thing is haunting me. I have to tell the world to release the things inside my heart to get a little relief.
If you're going to go to China and you're going to get a liver transplant during the 3 weeks you are there, then that means someone's going to go schedule an execution, blood type and tissue type the potential executee, and have them ready to go before you need to leave.
We call it a new form of evil on the world. It's never been done by any government in the past, to take a large group of its own people and say, we're going to kill you without any kind of a trial, and we're going to sell your vital organ parts.
Around 1999, there were around 150 transplant centers. 6-7 years later, they had 600 transplantation centers. This is an increase by 300% within such a short period of time without an organ donation program.
We went to an industrial scale operation against the Falun Gong community, a peaceful community of 70 to 100 million people targeted by the chairman of the party, and they were killed. As we say, 41,000 transplants by 2006. We could find no other explanation that they were taken from Falun Gong prisoners of conscience who had been convicted of nothing, were put into work camps, were blood tested and so on, and then when somebody came from the United States or Canada, they were taken out of a work camp and were killed, and their organ was flown to the buyer in Shanghai.
The organ transplant industry is in the hands of the military. The People's Liberation Army is responsible for the hospitals, the transportation of body parts, and the sale of them. It is therefore a governmental activity and constitutes genocide under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention.
And where does organ harvesting begin? It starts in the military hospitals. And then the armed police get involved, and in fact it becomes almost competitive between the armed police hospitals and the military hospitals. It is impossible for the Chinese Communist Party not to be watching that activity and blessing that activity.
It was bringing in about $9 or $10 billion a year, this industrial transplant operation going on across China now. It's a lot of money, a lot of hospitals are financing a lot of their activities through that.
Even within this quite straightforward resolution, there are still problems because the absolute deluge of propaganda from the regime in Beijing vilifying Falun Gong as some sort of extremist cult. Now, I've met, as I said, hundreds of members of Falun Gong. It is not a sect, it is not a cult, there is no money involved, there is no brainwashing. All the normal characteristics of a cult simply don't exist. These are people who practice their spiritual exercises on their own, and yet as I said, because between 70 and 100 million people in 1999 were practicing Falun Gong, this was seen by Jiang Zemin, then the leader of the Communist Party, as a threat to his own position. It wasn't, of course, but he saw the opportunity of creating an enemy within. Just as during the war, the Nazis singled out the Jews as a special characteristic and did what they did to the Jews. The same is happening today to Falun Gong in China. That is why it is genocide. That's why I say it's so serious.
I strongly believe that the 17-year campaign to eradicate Falun Gong will be seen as one of the great shames of recent Chinese history.
I think if you're asking about how this comes about in terms of motivation, I think there's a number of factors at play. One of them is compartmentalization. People at different parts don't know what the rest is doing, and this helps to make willful blindness function. People will say, well, I don't know, I see a body in the operating table, I don't know whose body it is, or I see a corpse that I'm cremating, I don't know whose corpse I'm creating, and so on. So that's one thing. Another, of course, is censorship, so that none of this is reported. You can't see through the media what's happening. You don't have the normal sources of information. And a third thing is incitement to hatred. I mean, as I mentioned before, the Communist Party is always making up these enemies, but it doesn't just say, designate somebody or some group as an enemy. They start these propaganda campaigns, and that was certainly true with Falun Gong, which depersonalizes, dehumanizes, marginalizes these people to the point where the few people who actually see and know what's going on, they'll say, well, Falun Gong are enemies, Falun Gong are not people, we can do whatever we want with them. And of course there's the greed factor, all this money that's being poured into it, and the pressure of the party if you break away from them. So this combination, this confluence of events leads to this awful result.
They made you disabled to think yourself. My whole body just become a robot, just performed to do what I have been programmed to do. They made you genuinely believe what you are doing is for a good cause. It is little later I realized I shortened this man's life. That is equal to a killer.
It's a crime against humanity. It's abhorrent, and it needs to stop.
This is a new form of genocide, and it's using the most respected members of society to implement it. This is one of the central tests of our time. We can't avoid this any longer.